Yeah, okay. And again, this is why nobody takes you serious, bro. You like it you're a foreigner and a
We need to.
communist
We need
control act.
to. We
And,
need
and
to.
I will make sure we will make sure, better dead than red, like people used to know this shit in the 80s, but the left took over our education system and now people bootlick for more government. And you
Okay.
are a product of it.
Can you?
You are
Okay,
a
I'm
product
gonna
of the
stop fucking with
government
you. I'm gonna
education.
stop fucking with you, and let me get 30
There's no
seconds in.
fucking with me, bro. I'm fucking with you.
Yeah,
You have a
I
government.
mean, you're
You
literally
are.
a wild animal. You can't control yourself. Okay, buddy. I try to be nice and respectful to everybody. You sound like you're a little older. I like being nice to older people. But you are just so disrespectful. You talked to me before. You know what I'm about. And you come back here and you're just screaming at me. Like you're just yelling at, you're just venting all like Fox News got you riled up against the Democrats and against the liberals and the education system. And it's like you're throwing all this on me and I'm just confused, you know? And then it just shows you just don't even want to talk to me. You just want to vent because you've been brainwashed in a really pathetic way by these boomer duopoly talking points. You have no self-awareness of how fucking generic you sound and unoriginal. I'm a pretty original thinker. I don't really fit within the duopoly narrative. I don't stand with Democrats. I don't stand with Republicans. I have my own views. And we have our own views, okay? You can't box us in one or the other. You can't say that we you can't project all the fucking Democrat bullshit on us. You can't project Republican bullshit on us. We're totally independent. You have very strong views about communism that are clearly ill-informed, and you're clearly unwilling to subject to any kind of test, any kind of reasoning. I don't know how I can help you. And it's sad because you know what? I just think you're angry at the wrong people, and it's like you're acting like a crackhead on the street. You're just randomly targeting people who mean you no harm, who you probably might even have a lot in common with if you actually did your research and talked to us. But you instead decide to be an asshole. You decide to be angry. And, I'm supposed to be patient with people like you, but I'm going to treat you like a human being. And if I'm going to treat you like a human being, it means I'm going to expect a bare minimum of decency and respect because I'm not a fucking welcome mat you can just step on and project and rage on. I am a fucking person. I'm my own guy. I expect a bare minimum of respect that I would treat with anyone, right? Regardless of who they are. You think that just because I call myself a communist, that what? You think I'm like the pluribus thing from fucking Pluribus and I'm just going to smile and be fucking nice to you? And then I'm here to sell you on some shit where I'm smiling? That's not fucking true. I'm actually a fucking person. You disrespect me, I'm going to disrespect you right back. Okay? We're not here to serve you in terms of your feelings. We have our own dignity. Okay? Each and every one of us. You can't just fucking step on us because you think we're a bunch of fucking Care Bears and Teletubbies trying to improve the country and do right by a lot of people here who are, life is going to shit for, which is a fact. I don't know what generation you belong to, but my generation can't afford homes, can't afford education, can't afford families, can't afford groceries, can't afford a future, and they're drowning in debt. It doesn't sound like you have a solution for that. You have delusions about how our government is run. You think that it's run on the basis of our Constitution, and it's just not. The government's been usurped a long time ago. Functionally speaking, the Constitution's been turned into a piece of paper that doesn't matter. It's bent in any direction they fucking want it to. The law means nothing. Epstein is proof of that. I could go into more detail if you want, telling you how much the system actually is objectively rigged against the common man, which it fucking is. But I feel like I'd fall on deaf ears. You have this idea that, we have the states, and we don't have a fucking thing. You have a prison country that's occupied by international financial capitalists who've got you by the balls, and they've turned the country into a farm to accumulate power through debt, really. It's not even just wealth, it's power, They have total control. It's just a system of total fucking control that they've created. I mean, they surveil anyone they want to. They have unlimited. And you're talking about stupid things like the Communist Control Act. Well, why did that pass in the first place? You know, we were friends with the Soviet Union. Henry Wallace was on track to, you know, lead an era of excellent friendship and relations with the USSR. What happened? Truman came to power because FDR was poison. One sec. TY, what's up with the 5? And Truman, if you didn't know, you know, was plugged up with the British financiers. The CIA took power over the country, trained by the OSS. America became beholden to this, transatlantic capitalist elite that wanted war with the Soviet Union because it wanted to maintain an international system of colonialism modified in a new financial form. That's why they created the IMF, to enslave the world with debt, deindustrialize America, deindustrialize Britain, the West. You know, you just don't know your history, buddy. I'll let you respond. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
And I do know history, and I do appreciate the fact that you spoke on a few things, and that was pretty accurate as far as the financiers and where the country's gone, and our country's been overrun. And you talk about when that happened exactly, and it happened in the 80s, but that's when it was super put in a fast lane, so to speak. But that's why the Communist Control Act was passed originally. People knew all this stuff in the Reagan years, and just to go back to, you brought up a lot of interesting things, and that's why the Groypers are holding more traction, because you brought up a lot of things that, that is true as far as the debt based systems. But then you failed to notice on who actually owns all those systems and who actually runs that. And, and it's the Groypers that seem to have their finger on the pulse as far as, the Jewish community seems to be running all these operatives that you seem to talk about. From our Fed to the National Reserve, to 1913 is exactly when our country started to go into decline, and talk about all those things that you just brought up. So I mean,
yeah, but the problem is, look, it's not that I'm allergic. Shut up. It's not. We can talk about that. Okay, I'm not allergic to pointing out extremely outsized Jewish presence in among the capitalist class. I have no problem with that. What I take issue with is this idea that you could just get rid of all the Jews and somehow you're fixing the source of the problem. Because let's remember, originally, okay, the financial capitalists were the Anglo-Atlantic elite. And the foundation of America's Federal Reserve System and capitalist system, it comes from the Rockefellers, comes from the Morgans, comes from the monopolists. By and large, weren't even Jewish. So does that take away the Jewish, the Zionist Jewish mafia-like, factions among the U.S. ruling class? Absolutely not. I mean, that's clear and obvious to anyone. But this idea that you can just, what? And what even is the solution? The idea that you just deport every Jew or remove every Jew and you're targeting the core of the ruling class, it's not really true. And that's just a fact, There are a lot of Jews. There's George Soros. He's like half Jewish. There's the head of BlackRock. But then there's also a lot, and it just sounds cringe saying that because, it's just like, well, it's just the fucking truth. I don't know how, that might not sound good to you rhetorically, but it's just the fucking truth. You can't just hit a Jew button and fix the fucking problem. And why that narrative gains traction versus us is because it's simpler. There's less of a barrier to entry. It's just simpler. That's why why is that gaining more traction because there's less education that's required to adopt that worldview. Everyone has an instinct to adopt this knee jerk, whatever trend. I mean, it's so easy. But when you demand more theory and thinking and that actually limits the amount of people you're going to be able to reach in terms of bringing them into your cadre, to your vanguard. And that's okay because only a minority of the population are fit to be communists, actually. It's always been the truth. China, for example, I think it's about 90 million are in the Communist Party out of a population of 1 billion, right? So about 10%, Most people can't dedicate that amount of time to just understanding how the world works. And another thing about Groypers is that they're just a direct splinter from the Republican Party. So if you want to just think of this in terms of a river and, the way the river is moving, the dominant rivers in on the US landscape, it's the Democrat and Republican parties. So if you fork off from the Republican River, TPUSA and all that shit, you're going to get way more steam and more motion because it's already fucking there. We are not beginning from the Democratic Party. We're not beginning from a pre-established momentum in U.S. politics. We're not beginning from anywhere. We're beginning from something that, at least to be frank, it appears pretty dried up. It's pretty old. And that's the communist history within this country. It's very niche. It's very small. It's very, it's there. There was the CPUSA and all the shit that went down with that. But ultimately, we are not attached to the immediacy of U.S. politics in ways that our rivals are. I don't, for example, look at Nick Fuentes. I think I have never watched one of his streams start to finish. But there might have been one or two that I tuned in. There was one that I told you about with the Charlie Kirk thing. I wanted to see his reaction. There was one other time I think I briefly tuned in. But when I tune in his streams, he's talking about things I don't care about and my community doesn't care about. Like, well, what about what Ben Shapiro said and what Matt Walsh said and like all these other, he'll name Republican politicians I've never even heard of and talking heads. And that's more pressing and more immediate as far as what exists now in U.S. politics. Like, that's what there is now. But that doesn't interest us a lot because we're just like so beyond that. We're that radical, I guess. Like, we've already arrived at a radical conclusion that, there is no meaningful political change that can happen within the Republican or Democratic Party or mainstream U.S. politics. So we've checked out from giving our attention or care to U.S. politics. Now, the majority of the American masses haven't. Majority of the American people still, when they think politics, they think of established politics, right? And so they're much more plugged into that and more sensitive to it than we are because, that's all they know. So what we're doing takes a lot more patience. I don't have the ability to pretend I care about what's happening in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party because I don't consider it meaningful because we see the end conclusion. We see the logical conclusion of it all. So we're really just trying to build something from scratch totally. Now, you seem to have faith in the Republican Party. You mentioned there's the party of the people or whatever. Look, buddy, I don't know. You seem older than me, like you lived through the 80s. I don't know what I could tell you. When I tell you there's nothing meaningful that can happen there, and that they're both fundamentally compromised, and that mainstream U.S. politics is a dead end, and it's bought out, okay, by financial interests. If you want to call those Jews, call them Jews. But both the Democrat and Republican Party are fundamentally compromised by the people who have money. I don't care what you call them. They don't represent the will of the American people. And, when you arrive at that conclusion, what can you do? You can continue getting a lot of attention from, you know, being adjacent to these discourses and stuff, but I've never had the illusion of being let in. You know, that's really what it is. Some of these other influencers really want to be let in. I don't want to be let in because I could see the system's not viable. So I don't know what you have to say, but that's really it.
I mean, again, you present itself. You digress well, and I this is where I've listened to your podcast, and uh, you talk as an old lefty, like an old liberal, and you say you don't, uh, you know, uh, affiliate with them, but you're a branch of them, just how the Groypers are a branch of
No,
the.
no,
But you
not at
are,
all.
because you can't take that ideology away from Bernie Sanders, away from AOC. Like these people have dedicated their entire political careers to forwarding communism, and then you got people like you, say that's not my version of communism, or we're going to start from the ground up. But to think that you could actually steal the torch from the movements that they did,
What,
with all these
what movement?
Marxist ideology,
But what
and
movement? I'll tell you, for example, Bernie in 2015, he had the primaries rigged against him. So he lost, and then he endorsed Hillary Clinton. 2020 came around, and it was pretty much rigged against him, thanks to Obama, and he endorsed
right,
Joe Biden. And
right.
There's not a single thing from
So
Bernie Sanders.
how can you pretend that the left aren't in that direction? That's the thing.
Because I'm
Everybody's
trying to tell you, Bernie was very popular among people, and that did represent a lot of people. But the only direction is the people who control the supply of the money, the credit, the printing of the money. Okay,
yes, and
that's
that
it.
and
So it doesn't
uh,
matter what Bernie wants. It doesn't matter what people lean in. It doesn't matter what leftists want. It doesn't matter. The only
all right,
thing that matters is
but and that
a preordained
I
agenda.
agree with that.
Yeah,
I
so
agree with that.
there's a preordained agenda, and they're gonna push it through, regardless of what anyone wants. And
But see, we have a name for Republicans that vote out of house. They're called rhinos, Republican in name only. So every single, like again, this goes back to listen to my power works two ways, right? So when a Republican, signs with a Democrat, when he supersedes our power, goes to the left. So every single time a Republican
there's no left.
concedes,
There's no
well,
left.
no, see, power does work that way. Whether you want to, that's what they're fighting for. Everything every bill, we lose rights, we lose power as
Yeah, but
citizens.
don't you see it's a
So,
show? It's
every
all
single
theater.
time a Republican, concedes and votes with
All
the
right.
left that the right hates, power
Okay.
moves away
So
from the
hold
right
on.
and
So
closer to the left.
Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna
Are not
signed and
Republicans.
passed a bill to release the Epstein files. Okay. So did the files get released?
No.
No, they didn't. So, the whole thing, everything that happens in Congress is just theater. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that can
Right.
happen there that's of meaningful, decisive significance that's going to break from the preordained agenda.
Well,
Nothing.
one more than the other. One party more than the other, for sure. I mean,
No, they're both. No,
you gotta give a little credit. I'm sorry, you have to give a little credit. The system doesn't
none
work
of the
well,
credit
but it
belongs
does
to.
work.
None of the
It
credit.
does work well. I mean, it doesn't work well, but it does work. You can put your votes in. You can elect people, and they do represent the people. Just like how your little imaginary
They don't,
Chad,
but they objectively don't.
like how you
They don't. But how do they? They don't.
on the local level, Republicans blow the doors off the left as far as state rights, personal rights, and everything in between.
What personal rights though? If you speak out against the system and the government in a meaningful way, they're gonna get you, and it doesn't matter. So what rights? I mean, right to what? You're talking about very trivial things that are ultimately not very meaningful.
Well, for starters, there's only one party that's demanding to hand in your guns. Communists, they love that. It's the left that you can't have a different type of view if you're armed. You know, uh, that's a
You
great
want to know
state right.
something though? You want to know something? Let me explain it to you then, because you're confused.
I'm not, bro. It's in
Getting
it's in the
getting rid of the
policy.
guns. No, let me explain it to you. Getting rid of the guns is a uniparty agenda. What happens is when the elite realize the people are not ready and they're going to resist too much, they give them the Republicans. And the Republicans say, oh, we're not going to take away your guns. Both the Republicans and the Democrats want to take the guns. The first gun control acts in California.
That's news to me.
Yeah, well, did you know the history?
I left.
Look at the history of gun control in California. It comes from Ronald Reagan. Okay, so
Oh, you mean the guy that was a Democrat and he switched? Just
no,
on
while
party
he
lines
was a
within a year?
Republican, while
Yeah,
he was a
I
Republican,
mean,
he did it.
not
He
all
did it
his
as a right
views,
wing policy.
not all his views switched over.
Listen,
you can
they're
make
gonna
that
they're
argument
gonna they're
too,
gonna
right?
wait. They're gonna
You
look.
can
I'll
make
tell
that
you,
argument
just
too.
like Trump promised to be anti-war, even though he's going
He
to
was
war with
also
Venezuela.
an ex-Democrat. 10 years ago, he was a registered Democrat. Not every view switches over.
I'm telling you, the Republicans, at least one generation from now, if we have that much time, they're going to be for gun control. I'm just letting you know. They wait. Sometimes they wait it out, and they wait for
That's
people to act.
speculation.
They
That's
wait.
speculation.
No, it's not. I'm telling you,
Bro, I'm
systemically,
telling
they
you
want
right
to
now.
take the guns.
I
Everyone
live in a
does.
Republican state. I left a failed fascist.
You live in a
lefty
Republican state, and your Republican governor might dare never to say in public he wants to take your guns. But he's going to wait till the coast is clear, till he has a good excuse to, and he'll do it.
Again, that's speculation.
No, it's just a game. It's all theater.
No, it's not. Like I said, you can make that argument that one day that might happen, but I'm telling you, until then, it's
No.
just speculation. And so far, there's no
All
Republican.
right. Well, look, I'm gonna finish it
third.
this way. Okay, the Republican Party. The only reason Americans haven't had their guns taken away is because the American people. The American people are the power, no matter what. When it's guns or it's abortion, it's anything. The real power is the American people. But the American people don't have an independent voice. So the Democrats and Republicans trick them into thinking that they're representing their will and their interests. But they're both on the same team when all is said and done against the American people. That's just a fact. You sound old and you haven't gotten that yet, and I find that sad. Maybe one day you'll wake up.